The bustling shopping center had morphed into a nightmarish crime scene, a chaotic tableau of shocked onlookers, frenzied first responders, and hushed whispers of horrified bystanders. Twisted red and blue lights bounced off the concrete walls of the shopping center, painting the serene evening into a chilling spectacle of eerie shadow play. The heart of this chaos was a still form lying motionless on the cold asphalt of the parking lot. A young woman, Erin. Detective Oskal, a man with years of experience etched into his rugged face, arrived at the scene with his junior partner, Detective Essen. Oskal's eyes, hardened by witnessing countless atrocities, scanned the area, drinking in every detail. He was a human lie detector, a seasoned player of the deadly chess game of crime and punishment. Beside him, Detective Essen, a younger but determined force in the field, kept pace, his eyes holding a different kind of intensity, a flame of justice that refused to be extinguished. He had a reputation for unwrapping layers of complex cases, penetrating the lies and half-truths to expose the core of the truth. "All right, Essen." Oskal's gravelly voice broke through the cacophony of the crime scene. "We've got our work cut out for us." "Yes, sir," Essen replied, pulling out a notepad and pen. Together they wove through the pulsing crowd, reaching the crime scene tape. The sight of the lifeless form of Erin, her arms laden with shopping bags, made Oskal's jaw tighten. Essen, pen poised over his notepad, glanced at his senior. The horror of the sight was evident in his eyes, but he steeled himself, ready to undertake the grim task at hand. The two detectives circled the area, taking note of the shell casings, the trajectory of the fallen bags, and the unfortunate position of Erin's body. The grim tableau painted a picture of a horrifying incident that had shattered the ordinary into the extraordinary. As they worked, a uniformed officer approached, carrying a bagged and tagged M14 assault rifle. "Detective, we found this near the scene. The murder weapon." Essen, kneeling near Erin's lifeless form, looked up. "Any eyed on the second male victim?" "His name's Ronald," the officer replied. "No prior convictions." Oskal took the bagged rifle from the officer, scrutinizing it closely. "All right, get the bodies to the morgue and the rifle to the lab. Let's not leave anything to chance." As the detectives immersed themselves in the grim intricacies of the case, the daunting magnitude of the double murder, suicide, began to sink in. But they were undeterred. The tragic events of the evening were a grim puzzle, a mystery that was begging to be solved. And it was their duty to ensure that the pieces came together, no matter how unsettling the final picture might be. In a small, quiet house that stood stark against the backdrop of the bustling city, Detective Essen sat on a squeaky armchair across from Sophia, the grieving mother of the deceased victim, Erin. The house was filled with a tangible weight of grief, a melancholic haze that hung in the air and turned the ticking clock on the wall into a dolorous metronome. Sophia, an old woman with a pale face that seemed even more colorless against the stark white of her hair, was a picture of profound sorrow. The twinkling eyes that once held joy and vitality were now dull, reflecting a profound pain that only a mother who had lost her child could comprehend. "Miss Sophia," Essen began, his voice carrying an empathetic weight, "I am sincerely sorry for your loss. We're doing everything we can to understand what led to this tragedy." Sophia nodded, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her faded dress. She didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes of the turmoil she was experiencing. The detective decided to tread lightly, aware of the delicate nature of the conversation. "Sophia," he continued, "do you know anything about Ron? The man who—" Her eyes glazed over as she recollected. Her lips quivered as she started speaking. Erin and Ron. They were friends, or at least that's what Erin told me. But Ron, he was a bit off. Essen scribbled into his notepad, feeling the shroud of mystery around Ron slowly beginning to lift. Was there anything unusual about Erin's behavior recently? Did she seem afraid or worried? Sophia shook her head, a single tear trailing down her face. No, nothing that I noticed. She was her usual self, shopping, working, spending time on her phone, chatting with her friends. I just can't comprehend why Ron would do such a thing. Ehsan paused, gently allowing Sophia the silence she needed. The room echoed with the ticking of the clock and the muffled cries of the bereaved mother. He knew the path to truth was winding and, at times, painful, but it was a path he was determined to tread. Finally, he stood, folding his notepad back into his pocket. "Thank you, Sophia," he said softly. "You've been very helpful." As he stepped out into the fading evening, Ehsan looked back at the grieving woman, a stark silhouette framed in the soft glow of the living room lights. He knew the mystery surrounding Erin's tragic demise was far from being solved, and the grief-stricken face of Sophia served as a poignant reminder that he needed to unravel this tangled web of betrayal and despair, for the sake of justice and closure. A few days had passed since Detective Ehsan's first visit to Sophia's house. He returned, hoping to gain further insight into Erin's relationship with Ron. What he uncovered, however, was a revelation far beyond his expectations. "Sophia," he started, a serious tone tinging his usually gentle voice. "There's something that doesn't add up about Erin's relationship with Ron." Sophia averted her gaze, her fingers ringing together in her lap. The house was silent, save for the dull hum of the city filtering through the windows. Ehsan took a breath, steeling himself for what he had to do next. "Ron's wife told me he'd been spending a lot of time talking to Elisa. On Facebook," he continued, watching her closely, but there was something odd about the messages. Lisa's picture was Erin. Suddenly, all color drained from Sophia's face. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, struggling to find the words. She finally met his gaze, a complex mix of fear, guilt, and regret mirrored in her eyes. "Sophia," Ehsan pressed, "were you pretending to be Erin online?" Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. Her head bowed low as she nodded in admission. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It started as a game. Erin was so popular, so loved. I was lonely and, I guess, I wanted to feel that too." Ehsan felt a rush of disbelief, anger, and pity. He took a moment to digest the confession, the gravity of Sophia's deception casting a dark shadow over the case. "Sophia," he finally said, his voice heavy with sorrow and disappointment, "you impersonated your own daughter, leading to a chain of events that resulted in her death. I have no choice but to place you under arrest." Sophia nodded, her face a mask of grief and resignation. The regret in her eyes was potent as she let Ehsan handcuff her. It was a quiet arrest, punctuated by the solemn ticking of the clock and Sophia's quiet sobs echoing through the otherwise silent house. As Ehsan led her out of the house, he felt a heavy pang of empathy. Here was a woman, lost in her loneliness, who had made a terrible choice that led to an even more tragic consequence. The case was far from over, but the unveiling of this deception was a step towards understanding the complexities of Erin's untimely demise.